If you're going to visit Dollywood in 2026 and want to pick the best day like the locals do, I'm going to reveal exactly how that's done and how that knowledge went into creating the Dollywood Crowd Calendar. See, if you look at the Dollywood Crowd Calendar and utilize the secrets and tips that I'm about to show you in this video, you're going to be far, far ahead of any visitor that comes to Dollywood throughout this year and really any year that follows. So if you understand what's in this video, it will help you for years to come. I want to show you and start off with the 2026 calendar and how it is different than the 2025 operating calendar. So this is put out by Dollywood. This isn't the crowd calendar, so to speak. This is the open days and hours of 2025 compared to 2026. And there's some key differences that are going to happen in 2026 that if you understand them, it will help you choose the lighter days to visit. We're going to start with the pass holder preview day. You'll notice March 2026, there isn't one, whereas this red one last year, it was just open to pass holders as a preview day to visit. In 2026, they're not going to have that. Instead, Dollywood has said they're going to opt for a pass holder preview of NightFlight Expedition. So pass holders will get an early chance to ride that ride when it launches. So that's super cool. And a couple other things that we notice is that in May, all of May is going to be open, whereas before there were some Tuesdays and Thursdays that were closed during May of last year. And what this does is it creates busier days around them. So since it's going to be open all week during those first 2 weeks of May, in 2026, we expect crowds to be a little bit more distributed, a little bit lighter in the 1st of May. So we're going to show you the crowd calendar in just a minute, but you need to know the changes in order to understand how this is going to affect the crowds. Another change that we see is that in August of last year, there were more days closed, whereas there's going to be more days open this year. Another change that was made is you can see this orange, they were open until 8 p.m. on the weekends in August of 2025. But in 2026, they're going to close at 7 p.m. So what this does actually is this 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. It allows them to have about one shift that they really need to have for a lot of their employees, which they call hosts, which can help them keep more things open. So there was a little bit of an issue in years past, especially when you get into August, about halfway through August, early September, where a lot of their employees, the hosts, were going back to school, possibly going back to their countries. There's people that work there that come from all over, of all ages. So a lot of times they'd have a little bit of a staffing crunch in August and September. This will allow them hopefully to mitigate that impact a little bit so that they can keep more things open. So in years past, there might be some concessions not open, some dining's not open, even some rides weren't open because they were just light on staff. So hopefully that will help fix that this year. Another change that you see is that last year, 2025, they were closed these last 4 days of October, so all the way up to Halloween. Whereas in 2026, they're going to be open all the way through October. It will be open on Halloween for the first time in a few years. So that's going to be super cool to see. And then it ends about the same as it did last year in the first weekend of January. So those are the big differences between last year and this year. So I want to go into how we go from this to creating the crowd calendar. So when we create the crowd calendar, there's a lot that goes into this. I'm going to break this down into a few different categories and stuff that you can see what all goes into it. We've got data, we got weather, we got the staffing issues we just mentioned. There's crowd flow that impacts it. There's new additions such as NightFlight Expedition. And then there's something new called the CCE. This is something new that has happened that has never really happened in years past, but we noticed it a few times in 2025, and it is definitely a factor you need to be aware of in order to pick the best day possible. All right, so let's dive in. The data. So there are a few things that are solid and known that really doesn't change much. And so that is previous year's wait times. So we have databases that show ride wait times throughout every day of the year. It also shows you what the weather was like on those days and how that impacted it. So we utilize that. That's like what most crowd calendars are based off of. But the ones that stop there don't give you as comprehensive as a crowd calendar as we try to put together for you all. The next thing is school calendars. We have data on which counties and which states are the biggest feeders of guests to Dollywood. So we look at the school calendars to understand which weeks are going to be the busiest, specifically with spring break and fall break. Knowing which schools are sending the most people to the area helps us understand which weeks are going to be the busiest. And then finally, with the data, we got festivals, events, and holidays. So these are Dollywood's festivals that they have throughout the year, the Harvest Festival, Smoky Mountain Christmas, all of those kinds of things. The events are things that either Dollywood puts on throughout the year, or it could be events happening in town. All of these kinds of things impact how heavy the crowds are going to be on any given day at Dollywood. The other is holidays, understanding which holidays drive traffic families to the area that will likely visit Dollywood. Helps us understand which weekends and days are going to be busy. So these are the knowns, these are the steadies, these are kind of the foundational things that go into creating this. But again, the ones that stop at this don't give you the whole picture, because there's so much more that can impact crowds and wait times and just how enjoyable a day can be at Dollywood. So one of those things that we look at is events. We were talking about specifically and sometimes non-calendared events, and this is an example of one. This is when the Christmas of Many Colors movie was released a few years back, and Dolly and some of the stars made a special appearance at Dollywood. This is an example of an event that wasn't on the calendar, but it brought a ton of people to the park on this specific day, mostly season pass holders that found out about it kind of at the last minute and rushed to the park to see Dolly and the stars that were in the show. So this is a good example of making sure you stay aware of what's going on at the park, especially the week that you are there, because things like this can definitely have an impact on how heavy the crowds are. Another thing to keep in mind is that Dollywood is getting busier, and Dollywood for the first time has popped into the top 20 amusement and theme parks in North America. They're number 18 on the list with over 3 million people that visited it last year. So there's a lot of people that love Dollywood, and it seems like more and more are loving it and visiting it every single year. And credit to the staff at Dollywood. They're doing a great job of introducing things and creating rides that are drawing the right types of crowds that are enjoying Dollywood for years to come. So it's a generational thing. So they're building rides that attract kids that, the kids grow up and have their own kids and they want to take their kids to the park, and it just compounds as generations continue. So definitely cool to see them becoming one of the most popular parks in all of North America. Okay, let's talk about weather. Weather can be good, it can be bad, and bad weather can actually be good. And this is an example of that. Locals, a lot of times, if they see that a day is going to be stormy, and not like all day stormy, like a big sail of rain, like it's just going to be a squall line of thunderstorms and lightning and rain, they know that a lot of visitors will choose not to go on those types of days. And instead, they'll go the day before or after that looks sunnier, and those can be heavier because of that. But this is an example. This was on a summer day a few years back, 5 p.m. This was right after a lightning storm had passed through, and the park cleared out. A lot of people didn't come because of, was expecting bad weather. And we pretty much had the whole park to ourselves after that storm passed through. This is my daughter standing in the middle, enjoying that her daddy knows how to pick a non-crowded day at Dollywood. So keep an eye on the weather. If it's looking rainy, that actually might be a really good light day to go if you can stand getting wet a little bit. One thing that a lot of people don't know that Dollywood doesn't exactly make very easily found and known is that they have rain checks. So if you go to the contact us page on their website, there's a little blurb on there that says, if the park experiences rain for more than 1 hour of the day of your visit, we will gladly give you a rain check to return another day. So all you pretty much got to do is, if it's raining for an hour, at least an hour, stop by the front booth and ask for a rain check. And so based on the information they have on their site, they will give you a rain check to visit anytime throughout the rest of the year. So it's a fantastic thing that they do for guests. They know that, it costs a lot of money for families to visit Dollywood, and they try to appreciate that hard-earned dollars and the people that visit, and, want them to have the best time possible. And so if you have a rainy day that causes you not to have as fun of an experience as you thought you would have, Simply ask them for a rain check, and more often than not, they will give it to you so that you can experience Dollywood on a nicer day throughout the year. So good to know that. So let's talk about staffing again real quick. A day where Dollywood doesn't have as much staff available can make it feel more crowded than it actually is. This doesn't happen very often, but there are some instances, specifically in the last half of August, when their employees go back to school, or a lot of them go back to school, that they have less available. They're adjusting shifts. And so sometimes this midweek days can have a little bit lighter staff, where they have a little bit less open. There's less concessions, less dining. So just keep that in mind. So if you're planning a trip, it's not necessarily to avoid those days, because they can be great. There's lower weights in the rides and whatnot, but just keep in mind how you go about your dining throughout the day. Picking your snacks at the right time of the day, a little earlier than lunch, a little later than lunch, a little earlier than dinner, later than dinner, whatever. Just time it around the crowds that typically eat at like 12 and 6, right? So just keep that in mind as if you visit on those types of days. All right, another big one is crowd flow. This is a really, really big deal. So if you get there at the park opening, a lot of times there's a big crowd right here waiting to get in, and here's the entrance. They'll come in this entrance, and the majority of the crowd will hang a left as they come in. So if you're right here at opening, you come in with a left, you're going to be with the pack of people all the way up through Timber Canyon, most of the time through Wildwood Grove. They're making a beeline to Big Bear Mountain back here. And they're going to be stuck kind of in this area for the first half of the day, because they're hitting Big Bear Mountain, Dragonflyer, going down to Timber Canyon, hitting Thunderhead, Mystery Mine, all of those, jumping up here to Fire Chaser, Wild Eagle, Tornado. So this is where all the action happens for the first half of the day. And when they add NightFlight Expedition, it's going to just compound the amount of people that are coming up in this area. So again, that can make a average day feel very, very crowded, or even a light day feel very, very crowded, because if you're stuck in this flow of people, you're going to be with them for the majority of the day, bouncing around to each of these rides in those lines. Whereas if you came in and took a right and hit, let's say, lightning rod, and did some of the stuff over here, avoided the crowds for the first half of the day, you'll probably run into them a little bit as you make your way up around this way or back around this way, but it'll even out a little bit as you get back in here, and you won't feel that crowd crunch for the first half of the day, at least, as you're experiencing most of Dollywood. So keep that in mind when you get there. If you don't get there early and beat the crowd, maybe make a decision to hang a right and enjoy some of the things in here that are less crowded for the first part of the day. All right, so new additions. This is going to be massive in 2026. So when NightFlight Expedition launches, it's going to be the only ride like it pretty much in the world. So it's going to combine 4 different experiences, and it's a ride unlike anything we've ever experienced in North America, which is going to bring a lot of new visitors to Dollywood. And so expect heavier crowds in 2026, probably than we ever have experienced. So I'm excited about this one. It's just a matter of, this is why understanding the Dollywood Crowd Calendar and everything that goes into it is going to be huge in 2026 to try to have the best visit possible when you go. All right, the next one is possibly the most important factor of avoiding crowds that we experienced in 2025, and that is what we call the crowd calendar effect. So in 2025, we released the very first crowd calendar for the first time. We've had people for decades ask us, when is the best day to visit? And we would tell friends and family the best day. But we wanted to put this out there to help as many people as possible try to pick better days to visit Dollywood that wouldn't be as crowded. But then we noticed a trend start to happen. There was people avoiding the most crowded days and going when they would see it light on the calendar, which would shift heavy crowded days to light days, and vice versa, light days to heaviest crowded days. And so it became interesting to see how crowds were shifting and changing, that for years had been the same on specific weekends throughout the year, but it was shifting more towards the weekdays. So we're having like Tuesdays and Thursdays be super heavy during the week when they were never that heavy before, in years past. So the crowd calendar effect combined with the data, the weather, the staffing, the flow, the new additions, all of that stuff can have an impact on which day to choose. We wanted to point this out because when you're choosing a day, specifically like here in May, when it says crowded versus heaviest crowds, and then some of these jump on like crowded to heaviest crowd to light. Again, this is based on previous year's data, but it could cause people to shift their visit from, this Saturday to this Sunday. So this is why it's important to watch the weather, because if you've got, Saturdays looking super rainy and awful, but Sundays looking good, there's probably a chance of this shifting this Sunday to being heavier, right? So just keep that in mind as you visit. What we like to tell people to do is the week of that you're visiting or the week before, check the weather, look and see which days are going to be rainy, which are going to be sunny, and just keep that in mind that a lot of people will shift their day at Dollywood from a stormy, rainy day to a less rainy day. Just keep that in mind as you're trying to pick the best day to visit possible. Now let's take a look at 2026. I want to point out specifically a couple things that are going to be super important as you're planning that we've discovered about 2026. One of them is that Knox County schools are going to be on break right here from March 9th through the 13th. That's why we've got red right here on this weekend. So this first weekend is going to be super busy because it's not exclusive to pass holders on this Friday. So it's going to be open to everybody. Knox County schools are going to be out. So a lot of people are going to be visiting on this first weekend in March. Another thing to note is that Easter is on Sunday the 5th. So a lot of schools are on break this week right after that. So from the 6th through the 10th is going to be the busiest week in April, most likely, with Saturdays being super heavy. One thing that we're going to keep an eye on is when NightFlight Expedition is scheduled to launch. We're expecting it probably around Memorial Day. That's typically when they open new major rides like that. So depending on when that is launched is when crowds will begin to get heavier. We suspect that a lot of people, especially non-season pass holders, will put off their visit to Dollywood until after that ride is available. So once it's available, you're going to have the influx of season pass holders plus regular visitors coming to Dollywood. So keep that in mind. We'll let you guys know exactly when that date's going to be, and we'll probably have to adjust this crowd calendar just a bit to accommodate for those heavier crowds after that launch. But again, we suspect it to be, this is mostly a guess right now, but based on previous years, it's going to launch around Memorial Day. We do expect Saturdays to be heavier most of the year. So keep that in mind. Saturday is always typically the busiest day to visit. Another big one, this is going to be a massive one in 2026 because many of the major feeder schools are out on October 5th through the 9th. Columbus Day is the 12th. So that's a big 3-day weekend for schools that don't have break. So this weekend, a lot like it was this year, the 9th through the 12th is going to be probably the busiest weekend of the entire year in 2026. This whole week of the 5th through the 9th is going to be packed. Into the following week, there's less schools on break during this following week. And this year we saw a little bit of a dip on the Tuesday and a little bit of the Wednesday following Columbus Day. So we expect this to be a little bit lighter than the 5th through the 9th, but it is going to be super packed. You got the leaf peepers, the people loving the fall colors, the fall break. It just all works together. You got NightFlight Expedition. It's going to be a super busy week that October. November, we usually see the heaviest crowds before Thanksgiving. So usually this Monday through Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Again, keep your eye on the weather, what it's going to be like that week. If you have a super cold or rainy or snowy day, it's probably going to be lighter in crowds, and people will opt to go the day before or after when the weather's not as bad. So keep that in mind if you're visiting Thanksgiving week. And the same thing for December. Those last 2 weeks in December are going to be super, super busy as people are enjoying Smoky Mountain Christmas, which is, you know, in my opinion, the best festival, not just of the year at Dollywood, but any park of anywhere in North America. They do a fantastic job, and it is definitely worth seeing if you've never seen it. If you've seen it, then it's worth seeing again. So these 2 weeks are going to be busy, and then they will close out the year on January 3rd. So if you plan on visiting Dollywood in 2026, this is a lot of the stuff that goes into creating the crowd calendar. If you know that you're going to be visiting Dollywood on a super busy week coming up in 2026, and there's just no way you can avoid that, be sure to check out this next video, because it will show you exactly how to make busy days feel less busy based on some strategies that we reveal in that video.